There's a lot of options in the mid-range for sim racing, so today's video is going to be a buyer's guide to try to cover most of the bases. As the mid-range market is so vast and very varied, much more than the up market or even low-end market, I won't be able to talk about everything. So if I missed something or you know something really cool, tell us below, or even if you have some tips for everybody that is coming here. I consider the mid-range market much more varied than anything else in sim racing. Therefore, in terms of budget, it also needs to follow that logic. It can't be the same logic as budget sim racing, where for say 200 or 300 you need everything. And therefore, the mid-range market needs to be a little more stretchy, and one piece of equipment in the mid-range may cost the same thing as something for the cheap or the budget end part of the market. I'm going to try to keep around 400 to 800 US dollars, pounds or euros for most of the equipment, and this is the logic behind this. We're going to start this with the second-hand market because it's going to be really important and also a treasure trove to a lot of people. You can get basically sometimes at the higher ends of the market for the same price as you would for some of the new things that we're going to talk about. And in this case, you can look for stuff like the Fanatec Podiums DD1s and DD2s, even the PlayStation version, where the price may be dropping to around 600 pounds. You can look at SemiCube 2 Sports that will drop from 1000 to something like to 600, which will be on the topper end of the price of wheelbases, but still these wheelbases will last a long time. Pedals, not so much, but these are two interesting options. You can look for also VRS wheelbases, and you can also look for high-end or mid-range pedals, stuff like using Velt Ultimates, and another vast array of pedals and wheelbases that will be cheaper than just buying new. But for new equipment, there's really a world out there, and it's going to depend on what type of objectives you have, where you want to play, and how much do you want to spend on each part. Some companies will have their quick release system a little more open, others will be having compatibility with the consoles, with Xbox and the PlayStation, and because of it, you may need to spend a little more. So let's start from the lower ends of the market, of the mid-range market, which will be with the Motza R5, the CSLDD, and also the Camus C5. The R5 though comes in the bundle if you need that, with some entry-level pedals and also with the steering wheel, but in terms of practicability of the force feedback system, there may be better choices even inside Motza. As for Camus, the Camus C5, even though it says it's 5 Newton meters, it's more around 7 or 8 in terms of peak torque delivery, but in terms of practicability, it's probably not the best out there because, well, what you see is essentially what you get. The wheel rim is actually pretty okay in terms of options, but if you want to change it up, you can't really because everything is integrated. But in terms of force feedback and in terms of force, it's actually a pretty decent wheel. As for the Fanatec, even though it has the same torque as the Motza R5, the CSLDD does have a couple of tricks up its sleeve, and one of them is actually if you want to upgrade the power up to 8 meters, you can do exactly that. And also there's a PlayStation version, and there's compatibility with the Xbox natively with the CSLDD with the correct wheel. The PlayStation version will be the GTD Pro, which is essentially the same wheel, but in terms of price, it actually makes it much higher to around 800 euros, which can be quite a lot, even though it comes also with pedals and a steering wheel. Other options from Motza R9, which is very practical and also extremely affordable, and the Motza R12, arguably probably the best deal around now for sim racing wheelbases. Continuing, there is an offer from Trustmaster, which is a Trustmaster T818. However, it's one of those that I can't really recommend because even though the force feedback is actually pretty good and highly underrated, in terms of ecosystem, they have an issue in my opinion, which will be with their quick release. It is really not as good as any other option here. That will include Logitech, Simagic, Motza, and Fanatec. However, if you are already integrated in a Trustmaster ecosystem and you have a bunch of wheels laying around, this might be a good option for you. Then we have the eternal rival of Trustmaster, which will be Logitech. It released a wheelbase about 2 years ago, which I find also be very underrated. However, they never really had an ecosystem to say. And just recently they released a bunch of items that are compatible with their wheelbase. The force feedback brings something called a true force, which is some sort of haptics that come from the wheelbase to add to the force feedback. The force feedback without it is actually pretty decent, but the extra layer of true force is actually fantastic and highly underrated. The wheelbase will have 11 Newton meters of torque, which will be probably what you need for sim racing, though the price is more on the more expensive side. The wheelbase is around 700. It does have an option with PlayStation compatibility or Xbox compatibility, which inherently raises the price of buying it. Around at the same price, there's an option from Fanatec, which will be the Club Sport DD. I use the Club Sport DD Plus. It has a very good 4-seat back, but it is definitely expensive. There's two options, the Club Sport DD and then the DD Plus with 50 Newton meters and PlayStation compatibility. But, 12 Newton meters is good enough. However, the price might not be something that you would like, even though Fanatec has quite a decent ecosystem. Then there are wheelbases from two brands that are definitely worth looking at, even though they are not as popular as Fanatec, Trustmaster, or Logitech. And the first one will be callsign. callsign has two options at around the price that you want to have a look for mid-range, which will be the Alpha Mini with 10 Newton meters, or the Alpha at around 15 Newton meters, but the Alpha is more on the more expensive part. And they will have an excellent quick release, and even though it's more expensive than the other options, it's definitely good to look at. Then the last one, also expensive, in this case will be the Asetek La Prima, which has a kick-ass quick release and definitely one of the best 4-seat back systems out there. Though if you are around the Micro Center in the United States, have a look every so often there, because there might be good deals with Asetek equipment. There's also an extra one coming from VRS, but VRS is definitely more on the up-end market and not as flexible, so it'll end up being more expensive. But if you can find that at a good price, that will be good. But the trick between choosing between all of these is figuring out what is your use case, what type of wheels are you going to use, third parties or integrated ones that they'll have in their own ecosystem, and figure out what you actually need, if you need PlayStation support or console support as well, or if you want to spend less in a wheelbase and still retain pretty much everything that you want, and then spend on the next thing, which will be the pedals. And pedals are as important, if not more important, than wheelbases. For pedals, there are so many options out there right now that I'm bound to forget not a few, but really a lot of them. I'm going to cover pretty much all the most popular as of this moment, but even so, I'll be forgetting something. Before, I'm going to start with one of those that's, decent enough, which will be the Fanatec CSL Elite V2s. It's basically one of my favorite pedals for the price. I think in reality, there is no better pedal for the price in that range of prices. The big thing about it is basically the very decent pedal. The load cell actually works really well in the elastomer. And then more expensive, you have the Fanatec V3, which I will not recommend because I think it's pretty much dated right now. Trustmaster offers a TLCM, and Logitech also has their Pro pedals, but in reality, even though the TLCMs are cheaper than the Fanatec CSL Elite V2s, and even though the Logitech one is more expensive, I actually prefer the Fanatec CSL Elite V2s. But from this point onwards, all the offers will start to become definitely more advanced and better built. We can start with the Matza CRP2 pedals that they have just come out. They are a little more advanced than the Fanatec V3s. Essentially, they're much more polished with better options than the Fanatec V3s. Good choice, and the price is really not that bad as well. Callsign will have a couple of options with the ever popular P1000 or the P2000 if you want some sort of hydraulic set. They really don't break the bank that much, but even though it's more on the expensive part. These two options are actually incredibly long lasting. They will have a lot of options for your pedals. You can change the springs, you can change the elastomer stack the way you want them, if you want them to be a little more responsive or less responsive, more mushy, stiffer, and all of that. And the P2000 will offer you a hydraulic set without breaking the bank, with the advantages of the P1000 as well, where you can change the springs, and or even if you want to change the springs in the hydraulic system. Asetek will have two options. The first one will be the La Prima. The La Prima is, for me, a little bit basic because there's really no way to change the throttle spring. It comes like that. You can upgrade it to a Forte throttle system, but in my opinion, it's really not worthwhile. Though, the brake pedal is okay. It's a more advanced version of the Fanatec V3 in my opinion and in my experience. And the Forte basically adds the spring for the throttle. The price is more on the expensive side, so this won't be really for everybody, and if you want to add the clutch, it will be even more expensive than that. But in terms of quality, they're actually pretty much okay. There's another option as well from Oisingveld, which will be the Oisingveld Sprints. They're ever popular, and Oisingveld has actually very, very good support. It's probably the best support in sim racing from my experience and from all the information that I'm able to gather. However, if you are able to forego some of the bells and whistles of more expensive or higher end pedals, you are able to get higher end pedals at more or less mid-range prices, and here are a few options. The first one will be actually the Venom A-Trax. You can get a 2-pedal set for around 500, 550, which is really not too bad, but it will be without the clutch. Then you have the case of the Sim Talentos. They're a little more expensive. In my opinion, it's the best load cell pedal that I've ever tried thus far. I really like the construction of it, and the brake system is actually pretty dope. P1 Sim will have the Mistrals, and P1 Sim will have the Mistral pedal set. I've tried them in Sim Racing Expo 2023, and for the price, it's actually a pretty good pedal set, and it also has haptic motors inserted into the pedal set. There are many other options in sim racing in terms of pedals, but I will forget them, and I don't have experience with all of that, so I need to rely with you. Please tell me below more options for mid-range-ish pedals. Even in second hand, that will be extremely useful for everybody. We can also talk about sim racing rigs, because you do need to mount this somewhere, and for these types of equipment, I would definitely recommend that you get a sim rig, something that is static, and not use this on a wheel stand. In my opinion, for mid-range equipment, you should rely more in sim racing rigs that are built of extruded aluminum, because they will be more practical. They won't be that expensive, and if you are able to source the aluminum parts yourself, you can actually spend a pretty penny and order the aluminum extrusions and build the sim rig yourself. This is my guide. Hopefully it was useful for you. What I'm trying to say in this guide is that there are many options in the mid-range market that goes from lower entry-level mid-range, that goes up to a more mid-range that is higher end. There's lots in the mid-range that you can do. You can also spend more in a part and then spend less in the other if you want, for example, better pedals and a wheelbase that is not as powerful. And when you pick and choose your equipment, you should use pragmatism and feel like what is important to you. You need to figure out what is really important for you. If you are patient, you can get promotions. Black Friday is coming around, and plenty of stores will have some sort of offers, and then you can even get higher end at mid-range-ish prices. Or if you save in one place, you can spend a little more on the other, especially with the PCs if you are trying to build a PC for yourself as well. I hope this was helpful to you. I know this won't be covering everything, because I think it is impossible. Even if we wasted 5-10 hours on a video, it wouldn't be comprehensive enough as it needed to be. So I'm relying on you to, make a comment, tell us what is a good piece of equipment around this range, or even more expensive or least expensive, that might be useful for somebody else that is looking for something in sim racing.